On today's show, you might have heard, but Mike Shildt, he retired. So the Padres are going to need a new manager, and we're breaking down some of the obvious and not so obvious candidates that could replace him, as well as, because why not, answering more listener questions and comments. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, October 15th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've covered this team for nearly 6 years now, not just for this podcast, but various other outlets, including JustBaseball.com, chief among them. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Go check that out. And today's episode, guys, we're breaking down Mike Shildt replacements. Because why not? Pretty simple, right? Simple topic. Not so simple answer, though. We're going to talk about it. All the big names. We're going to start with some obvious big names that I think are not at any chance going to be the coaching candidate, I think, for the Padres. And look, I think that in general, when it comes to Mike Shildt, I think that there's a lot of assumptions being made right now, which is true, which is fair, I should say. That, oh no, Preller's just going to hire another person who's just a puppet for the front office, or, that's what he tends to do, right? He'll hire one guy that isn't a puppet and then one guy that is, because it doesn't work out, right? And he just hired someone who was more of an old school guy, and reportedly, and talking from Dennis Lin, like, they did have their disagreements, but also mentioned in that article, Mike Shildt was like, but I appreciate how honest he was, that I could communicate him and I didn't have to sugarcoat anything. So again, I'm not getting any vibes that like Shildt is Bob Melvin 2.0 in the sense of, wow, those two have irreconcilable differences and all that stuff. So that's not the vibe I was getting, but it's still a surprise, and we're going to be talking about it for a long time until we find out who the new replacement is, right? That's it, and there's a bunch of guys, right? There's a bunch of guys that are in-house that could get promoted. There's a bunch of guys outside of the Padres ecosystem, I guess, that could get promoted as well. But let's start up with some of the names that come to mind that I do not think in any way in heck are going to happen. Names that I already am getting comments about, right? Like some of the big names that are just, in my opinion, no chances of happening. So let's talk about Javier Reyes' candidates that he's seen and thinks of his own for the next Padres managerial position. And in my opinion, I kind of want to go with someone fresh, someone who's going to take a more progressive approach, someone who might not necessarily be literally Gabe Kapler, but back when Gabe Kapler first started, he was known for all the tinkering. He was doing weird stuff that I don't think made sense. Like in some cases, going bullpen day on opening day, right? He did this once with the Phillies. I get that. But at the same time, I think that just having someone who's going to mix things up and not say, you know what, I don't care if Arias has 3 batting titles. If he's not hitting, he's not hitting. But let's put him at the number 7 spot. Let's put him over here. Let's just try things. I would be really open to that. Some of the candidates, right? Joe Maddon is a name that I've seen pop up. He's been out of the game for a little bit. He had a really bad stint with the Angels. This is a no for me because I think that Joe Maddon is a lot of reputation. And I like Joe Maddon. I think that he probably did a good job cultivating a really balanced, safe ecosystem, especially with those Cubs teams, right? Especially with the Rays. But something tells me that baseball, maybe it's passed him by. It ended really poorly with the Angels. They had one of their worst losing streaks ever with him as their manager. Not that it's his fault. I get that. But I don't see Joe Maddon being a guy. But I would not be as opposed to it as some of the other names I'm about to mention, only because big personalities on this Padres team, maybe they need another big personality like Joe Maddon, but I just don't think that his game strategy has held up over the years. So I don't think that that's a name, although I imagine that's going to pop up more and more. Bob Melvin. I'm kidding. It's a joke. I can't even hold it. I was going to be really serious and be like, go through all the pluses and minuses of Bob Melvin, but obviously can't happen. Was just fired by the Giants. I don't think that that's as much of an indictment on him as some other Padres fans think and maybe are even celebrating, because in my opinion, the Giants have been run really poorly for a while. They have a first-time GM in Buster Posey, who's got a lot of people around him, but that team has just been really, I don't want to say poorly run. Let's say poorly, not disastrously, because they've at least had some good players. They've got some decent signings that have come through with Willie Adames, with the center fielder, Jung Ho Lee, stuff like that. But I think that that's just not happening because of the irreconcilable differences. Although it would be hilarious if for some reason he was the manager. Next up, Will Myers, which is just a dream for me. Bring back Will, have him in that clubhouse in any capacity whatsoever. I'd be a fan of it. Obviously not going to happen, but I saw it on Reddit. Somebody posted the clip of him when he was buying shots for everybody after the Dodgers playoff series win. And again, it's like, that's stuff like that, right? When people say the Padres carry themselves a certain way, like, they're trying to act like they're so brash and arrogant, man, they're excited. That's what it is. They're excited because this is a loser organization historically, and now they're actually winning and doing stuff, and you got Will Myers going out buying everybody shots at a bar. This is after the 2022 playoff series. One of the best weekends of my life. I was hanging out with my sister in Maryland, in Chester, and just hanging out for her birthday. It was just us, couple cousins, just hanging out, watching stuff, and my cousin's in the pool, just like, he was like smoking a cigar, and I came out, I was like, dude, we did it. And he's like, really? He's like, come in here, man. Sit down. We got to chill and just take in the nice moonlit sky. That's the Padres beat the Dodgers, right? So I'm just kidding about that. But the last actual candidate that I think is worth mentioning, which is the first one, not Joe Maddon, not Bruce, not Will Myers, right? Not Will Myers, not Bob Melvin, but Bruce Bochy. 70 years old, just won a World Series recently, has history with the Padres, and would be great. I think that he would be an immaculate signing. But he's already ruled out returning to the Giants, which is a team that just fired their manager also, and they have a manager vacancy, and he has a lot more of an attachment to, right? Bruce Bochy, I believe, was 95 to 2006, 2005, 4, around that he was manager for the Padres, and they had some good moments then. By the way, like, they had good moments. They made the World Series, for God's sake. So he's had an attachment to the Padres, but I think a bigger attachment to the Giants. And if he's ruled that out, I don't see it. And according to Dennis Lin's article where he talked about Mike Shildt, multiple team sources said former Padres manager Bruce Bochy, 70, is not expected to be a serious candidate to return to San Diego. And I think that Dennis Lin has really kind of nailed these things down. I would be shocked if Bochy came out. Maybe in a world in which the Padres were a little bit better suited, right? If he's ruling out the Giants, maybe he's like, I think that they're a little bit over there, right? Came back to the Rangers, and the Rangers are spending a lot of money and had some good prospects. Maybe if the Padres had some more prospects, maybe if it didn't feel like last year was their best chance, maybe Bochy was an option, but I do not see Bruce Bochy happening. I think it would take a miracle for that. It would take some real Preller finessing for that to happen. I just don't see it. It's been too long. It would be fun. But it also, to me, goes back to what I just said at the top of this podcast. I think it should be more forward thinking. Hire some fresh blood. Hire someone who is not just fresh blood, but someone that you're going to let just kind of tinker and whatnot. Do things differently. Move things around. But it's hard, right? Because then you also want to have someone who's a veteran who might have respect for players, right? So it's not an easy decision who to hire as the manager, right? And it's definitely going to be an important one for the Padres going forward. And as much as I think Bochy would be a very calming presence, I think that he would have a nice he would be loved by San Diegans, right? They love Bruce Bochy. They never were super thrilled that they had to lose him. He goes to San Fran and is just owning them for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years maybe, some might even say. But I don't see it. And if Dennis Lin doesn't see it, then I don't see it either. But that doesn't mean he's the only candidate. We've got a lot of other ones, and I'm going to talk about them in just a second, including my official prediction. I'm serious. Usually I don't do this. My official prediction for who the Padres will end up having as their next manager, and the tinfoil hat is coming on, guys. So you won't want to miss it. Just 1 sec. 1 sec to talk about one of our sponsors, and that is our friends over at Gametime, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing like catching the baseball, the football, the basketballs, the soccers, the women's basketball, the racing. I think they do it for racing, right? Well, whatever it is, actually getting tickets, it can be tough. Queues, login screens, all the surprise fees. It is not as fun, and that's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price that you pay. And honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than kind of like any other way I've bought tickets. It's really great. Shout out Gametime, man. I love products that work and are just there for you. The sports fans. Us sports fans, we go through it with our own teams, so don't make it harder for us. So go check out Gametime, guys. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, that's promo code LOCKEDON. MLB. Locked On MLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go. Download Gametime today. And just like that, everybody, we are back here thriving and vibing on the Locked On Padres podcast. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember to tune in for the rest of the week. We're going to talk about Jackson Merrill. We're going to talk about more big questions about Mike Shildt. It's going to be great. It's going to be great, guys. Just because the season for the Padres is done does not mean that this show is. Let's continue though with some other candidates for this Padres managerial position. And these are the more serious ones, right? The first segment was a lot of jokes and just messing around and just talking about what I think they should be looking for vibes-wise. And there's a bunch of them, right? And I think that, as mentioned in Dennis Lin's article, after Melvin left, Shildt eventually was named manager over then offensive coordinator Ryan Flaherty, who is believed to remain a favorite of Preller's. Flaherty, now the Cubs' bench coach, is expected to again receive consideration for the managerial opening in San Diego, league sources said. Some of the same sources anticipate that other candidates will include Padres pitching coach Ruben Niebla, bench coach Brian Esposito, special assistants Scott Servais and AJ Ellis, and former Los Angeles Angels manager Phil Nevin. So, firstly, AJ Ellis, I'm going to be honest, don't have enough of a take on him. And I don't feel like he's the guy. I feel like the Padres have a little bit of a mishmash of all these different guys and player roles and offensive roles that are like, okay, whatever. But in my opinion, Ryan Flaherty, he leaves to go to the Cubs. That team has a really nice year offensively. And the Padres last year had a very nice year offensively as well. So I'm just saying over these past few years, we've had some cool offensive moments. So if you want to go with Ryan Flaherty, that's not bad. Not a lot of experience, very young, for sure, right? And he was a finalist, just like last year. And I think that that's totally fair for Preller to be looking at this guy as a potential replacement. And due to his youth, I could see that he could be a guy that's more willing to be in line with Preller and a more analytical approach, more forward-thinking approach, as opposed to someone like Phil Nevin, right, who does not have a great record in his very few moments being a coach, right? He has not had the best record in the world. He is a Padres guy. It would be fun. But is he a former Padres guy that's like beloved? I think he's liked. I don't know about beloved. So it wouldn't be the same thing as like a Bruce Bochy level. So I don't know if I totally see Phil Nevin. And it's not like he was one of the biggest, finalists, right? It seems like Ryan Flaherty's a finalist. So it seems like Ryan Flaherty's a guy. Benji Gill is another one. Mexican League manager. He was getting a lot of consideration. It seems like it was Benji Gill, Ryan Flaherty, and Mike Shildt. Those seem like those were the three guys, right? So I like that. That's not too bad. But again, Benji Gill, he's done really good stuff over there, and I think there's a reason why he's been getting consideration for a few years now from a lot of major league clubs. And I know that I don't really have like the most in-depth analysis for like coaching tendencies, because in baseball it's a little bit harder to evaluate that. In football, you can talk about that all day. I formation offenses where they want to play quarters or dives and the defense more often. You can look at tendencies that coaches do in other sports a little bit better, right? In basketball as well. But for coaches, I'm just going off of a little bit of vibes and record, so I think that Benji Gill could absolutely be a candidate. Some other ones, Ruben Niebla, who was mentioned as well in that section in Dennis Lin's article. I think that Ruben Niebla, right? And by the way, yes, my bad. Benji Gill wasn't mentioned in the article. I'm just bringing up guys that were close last year. Ruben Niebla, to me, I don't think that there's a reason why he wasn't promoted to manager in any nefarious way back in Cleveland. I don't have any idea why the Cleveland let him go. I cannot believe that they got Ruben Niebla. But this is one of those situations where I'm kind of like, I kind of don't want to break, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's done so much good for this Padres team and their new investment that isn't necessarily him, but the fact that he gets to be around a new investment in a pitching lab that they started developing recently. And that's available to have, more forward-thinking, next-level analysis that can help pitchers be better. And all the pitchers that we've seen that have gotten better under Ruben Niebla, whether it be for short stretches or longer stretches, whether it be the bullpen guys that have propped up out of nowhere, I kind of want to keep letting him cook there. That's my take. But I also think that if there's someone who deserves it, it would be Ruben Niebla, because the results, more than any guy we've talked about, with the exception of Bruce Bochy, are there. more than any of those other guys. Like, this guy has turned Cy Young winners left and right. Blake Snell won his second Cy Young with this team. Dylan Cease, while he fell apart this year for reasons that I don't really understand, he had one of his best seasons ever last year. You have Michael King, you have Seth Lugo, you have Michael Waka, you have, the bullpen guys that sometimes come out of nowhere. Jeremiah Estrada, right? Like, the success story he's been. David Morgan, the success stories that he's been, right? Even some of the guys that, didn't have great seasons for this team that have been propelled upwards. I kind of want to keep letting him cook in that area, right? If anyone's going to figure out, without the pitching prospects and with all the stuff that they traded away, this team's pitching, I really don't want to move on from that spot, but I won't hate it because, again, he has more winning positive results than I think any of the other candidates. And speaking of those other candidates, Brandon Hyde, speaking of success, Brandon Hyde, you might remember him. He was the 2023 Manager of the Year, and it was for the Orioles, if you guys don't remember. And you might be thinking, well, dude, he got fired, man. Like, the reason he got fired, that is not that man's fault. He got fired very early into the season, and it is not him. He was the fall guy for that team. Clearly, that team spent zero money on starting pitching. That is their problem. And guess what was the Orioles' problem immediately? Starting pitching. All they had was a fledgling international prospect in Tomoyuki Sagano, who wasn't very good. He was, startable. Don't get me wrong. But it ain't his fault that your GM cowered and didn't offer anybody money, didn't go after Corbin Burnes, and instead is like, yeah, Charlie Morton and Tomoyuki Sagano is going to be enough to propel this rotation forward, especially when Christian Rodriguez, is that his name? I'm blanking on his name right now. The Orioles pitching prospect that was the number one prospect for a while, especially when he really didn't pitch much at all, and he was hurt. So that's a guy that has recent success as a manager, unlike a Ruben Niebla, and has a good record. And again, he was the fall guy. It's not his fault that the team didn't spend any money on pitching. The team fell apart immediately. It's not his fault. Like, what do you want him to do? At that point, like, that is clearly a fall guy thing, especially for a manager and Elias, that I'm just like, dude, you had the green light. You have the new ownership. That's embarrassing for the Orioles. And I don't mind that as a potential candidate as well. Got a little bit of a YouTube comment, and we have my personal pick for the Padres' next manager. Not necessarily something that I want. I don't really know if I have a want for the Padres' next managerial position, but I do have someone that I think they're going to do. Firstly, we got a comment on the channel, and you guys know that I love it when you send your comments. Feel free to send more. From @itsover.xi7tr says, the Padres should consider hiring Jays hitting coach David Popkins as the new manager. I hear hitting coach, and I'm interested. So David Popkins did a good job with the Blue Jays. I think, considering what that team did this year, and what that team did this year was basically they paid Vladdy, right? They played Vladdy Jr., and that was kind of it heading into the year. The Blue Jays were the most quietly successful team this entire year. Alejandro Kirk, 116 WRC+. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., whatever he's figured out that got him out of his rut, he's been great. Bo Bichette, he's been great. Dalton Varsho, he had a nice bounce-back season. They even got some stuff out of Davis Schneider for the 82 games that he played. And even Ty France a tiny bit. Not as much. It was only 37 games. But then George Springer, I think, would be the biggest thing, is that guy came all the way back. Huge bounce-back season. He was the highest wins above replacement player on the Blue Jays this year. He had 32 home runs. And he's always been good, Mr. George Springer, but deserves some credit. So I like the mention. Of Dave Hopkins. It would be an interesting hire, and it would be a new one that we're not expecting. And if there's one thing about the Padres, I'd like someone who has a little bit of offensive record, in my opinion. Get the best out of this offense that, in my opinion, for far too long, it's been way too high salaries for these guys for them to still be, at best, okay with runners in scoring position, in my opinion. They weren't disastrous this year like they were in 23. They certainly weren't as good as they were in 24, but I think that that's been a common theme all these years, is like a really underperforming offense. Sure, that could be a part of the Petco confines, but really underperforming, I would not mind bringing in someone like that. But we have my prediction for who will be the next manager of the Padres, and we're going to answer some of your questions from the comment section in just a second, guys. But first, I need to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel, and we've talked to you about a lot about our friends over at FanDuel, and that's because there's no better place to go when you want to get in on the action, right? And new customers right now, they can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, whatever bet it is, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, whether it be for parlays, whether it be for player props, whether it be for the money line, the different sports. It doesn't even have to be baseball or football, whatever you want. FanDuel has got whatever you need. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. FanDuel, go check them out. And just like that, everybody, we are back here at the Locked Up Padres podcast, thriving and vibing despite it all. We're talking AJ Preller. We're talking Mike Shildt. What are they going to do to replace? What is AJ going to do? My prediction for the Padres' next manager spot is Scott Servais, former manager of the Seattle Mariners. Look, we know that, and again, I'm putting my tinfoil hat on. I only have my hoodie hat on, so that's what we're going to do for now. Call him Sketchy Javi when he I look so dumb. Everybody check out the YouTube. It's really stupid looking. But here's my prediction. All right. I'm going to look as menacing as possible. Scott Servais, possibly, maybe he's come into contact with AJ Preller over the years because of his relationship with Jerry Dipoto and all the trades those two have made. Maybe he's familiar with him. Maybe they talk about him a lot. Right? Jerry Dipoto, in the piece on AJ Preller from before the playoff loss, that came out about him and how weird he is, his basketball hobby and all that sort of stuff, that he's like, hey, I love it, man. I love that we can always talk crazy trades at 3 o'clock in the morning for star players. It's great. I love working with that dude. So maybe he knows a little bit more about Seattle culture and what's going on with Scott Servais. But that's not my main thing for the conspiracy theory. And the more I keep talking, the more I'm going to lift my hood down. The other thing for Scott Servais is this. They brought him on board recently after being let go by the Mariners. And they brought him on board. And I think that when it comes to, right, he's a special assistant. You know who else was brought on board after being let go? A little bit unceremoniously? Mike Shildt. You guys know where I'm going with this. Mike Shildt, a former manager of the year. Scott Servais, at one time, really high praise. Could it be AJ Preller? Maybe it could be ownership saying we want a little bit more of a proven name. I could see Scott Servais making the jump. It's the same kind of path that happened with Mike Shildt. You've had a manager who got let go from a successful team. Then he comes over as a special assistant, right? And then all of a sudden, he's the manager. I could see it. I could see it. And he's had some big personalities over in Seattle. So that is my prediction, not my want. Let me be very clear, not my want. I think Scott Servais, it says something that the Mariners have had their best season as soon as they got rid of him. Or mostly as soon as they got rid of him. Although I think the bigger thing is that they actually tried and they traded for some big bats and, you know, Randy Arozarena, you know, Victor Robles has been okay for them. Julio stepping up. Cal Raleigh went nuts. But I'm just saying, I could see it. It's boring. I know. I think I'm more a fan of the Popkins hiring. I think I might be a little bit more a fan of the potential of Brandon Hyde. But that's my prediction for what they're going to do. I'm just following the tea leaves about how this works. And again, I don't know for sure. We'll probably find out somewhat soon. But until then, it's anybody's guess. But that's my breakdown for potential Mike Shildt replacements. Let's get into the mailbag just a little bit. We got a little bit of a troll comment from @Evelyn Ayala who said, oh, so now Luis Arraez is a good player? Remember all that crap you talked about him? You literally belittled him. Make up your mind, bro. For those wondering, I was praising Luis Arraez towards the end of the season because I thought that he changed his plate approach. You're allowed to do that. So, you know, guys, I still stand by my overall feeling on Luis Arraez, who I do not think will be back next year, unless it's for a really cheap deal, which isn't impossible, and that's something that I would be against, by the way. But I think that my biggest problem with Arraez is hitting him number 2. I just think that it made no sense for a bunch of different reasons. So, yeah, sometimes I change my opinion on a player. If I see more than just them hitting, I love that he started taking walks, swinging on first pitches, not letting the zombie first strike going in there too often, and certainly not the second strike. I liked what I was seeing from him. Of course, we didn't get as much as we would have wanted, but hey, what can I say? This is another comment that I just like repeating, but it's also been echoed by you guys, the listeners. This is a tough one. Machado and Tatis. This is from @ADK7962. This is a tough one. Machado and Tatis had pretty good regular seasons and went to sleep during the wild card, and no one can control that except Machado and Tatis. I think last year was the best chance for the Padres. It's going to be bad before it gets better for the Padres, I'm afraid. It's a sentiment that many Padres fans absolutely agree with. And because I can't go an episode without talking about the Padres fans or Dodgers fans internet wise, @the Kershaw Curse, again, incredible name, and I love your little elephant Display picture, Javi, give us a break. Profar held on to the ball as Betts was rounding the bases because he thought it was a home run. It wasn't just taunting the fans, it was pranking the fans. He pranked everyone as he was bouncing up and down. That taunt is not just a regular taunt, get a clue. Once again, baseball fans, softest fans of any sport. Now it's a problem because Profar pranked people. Okay. At Eddie Garcia 7406 says, and now you have no farm system because you depleted everything. Man, you have a Autobots icon. The good guy Transformers, and you're leaving hate on this channel? Optimus Prime would be very ashamed of you. But let me just talk about that. That is the biggest obstacle for the Padres, is going to be the lack of a farm system. AJ keeps retooling it over and over, and this is not the first time everyone has said that the Padres system is done. Let me be very clear. Not the first time. People said this after the Snell and Darvish trades. I am dead serious. I will find the comments, because I've got them, and I got DMs about it too. Right? They said this for sure about Soto, which understandably so, right? Don't give up, though, on the farm system because I've seen these things change, like, really quickly. At Robert Murdy 9938 says, I think Michael King will re-sign with the Padres. He was most successful these last years because of Ruben Niebla. And stop hating on Manny. Manny has been everything that Padres fans wanted. It has been part of the success we have had in the last 6 years. Hey, I'm not hating on Manny. I'm just giving criticism of his season. And it's true that the guy hasn't showed up in the playoffs. It's just true. He's had 1 year with an OPS above 700. I have no problem with Xander and Iglesias being pissed at the umpires. It was a bad call, and they have a right to be upset. Yes, we should have scored more runs in the whole series, but we didn't. That's something we have to improve on next season when we make the playoffs, and hope you do come back as host next year. Thank you, Rama. And again, I'm not upset that they were upset. I just think that the way they took it out, the amount of upset over the umpires and the continued even after the game was done, even days after, it just doesn't look good when you didn't hit, right? It feels like you're scapegoating the umpires. That's what it feels like when you're an outside. I'm just saying what everybody feels when I think they watch that. That's just me. What else we got here? At Cam Ward Play has a lot to say about Tatis. Right? That's what we're going to end today's episode with, because why not? We love Tatis. He says, great take on Tatis, Javi. Thanks for remembering that he got off to a great start in 2025, and everyone was talking about how he had matured and was ready to reassume his position as one of the superstars in Major League Baseball. Then came the first series at Dodger Stadium, which has been his personal playground in recent years. Determined to put an end to his success there, Dodgers pitchers threw at him repeatedly, and inevitably, he got hit on the hand, which turned out to be a major setback. Even though he did not go on the IL, he immediately went into a slump, and his power numbers dropped. So there's definitely something to be said for that. Besides, it's pretty dang hard to be a 300 hitter these days when so many pitchers can mix 98, and wicked speed low and away, and blah, 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 blah. And the case, it's always good. The Luis Arraez theory could very well explain why he wasn't getting good pitches to hit for most of the season. Maybe hitting Merrill at number 2 will change that next year, but the other factor that could be that with guys like Hayward, Diaz, Maldonado, etc. hitting in front of him for 60% of the season, he really came to bat with runners on base or in scoring position. Great point. I brought this up with the Arraez thing. I don't mind when Arraez was batting second early on in the year because they didn't have anyone. On top of Cronenworth and Merrill, right? Remember that period where it was literally Tatis and Manny versus the world? Like, I'm not blaming for that. I'm blaming you continuing to use Arraez when you had Cronenworth playing a little bit better. Not that I want him to. And then you had Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn doing a lot better, right? That's what I didn't like. So no need to give him anything to him. He says, and one more thing that needs to be mentioned regarding Fernando's lack of superstardom is his charisma, swagger, and joie de vivre that seem to be lacking this year. He still plays the outfield with reckless abandon, but we saw much less of that on the bases this year, as well as fewer dramatic bat flips. The team feeds off that energy, and it needs to come back next year somehow, along with his intensity in the playoffs. But you're absolutely right. At the end of the day or season, Tatis is not the biggest problem the Padres need to address. I want to conclude, first of all, great assessment, Cam. Thank you for agreeing with me, I guess. And I agree. You see the Tatis juice in the outfield with the diving catches he makes. I still am skeptical that maybe there's a personal thing going on, because he just didn't play with the same joy. He just didn't. And part of that was because he wasn't hitting bombs as much as usual, right? Only 25 home runs this year. But it's true. He didn't have that. So maybe that's another thing that we want to have out of a manager, right? Get the Jim Harbaugh thing going. Bring your guy out of his shell. This is not a shell guy, but he's a guy that hasn't had that same vibe. It's also possible that he's like, look, I got humbled big time. I am not going to be a dancing around dude the same way anymore. But then again, I see him in the outfield. I see the hat commercial. I still think he's got that personality, but he was just a little bit down this year. And I'm wondering, actually, will we hear anything about that? Will we get some insider story about that in the offseason? Not impossible. So keep an eye out for that, guys. I know how the media industry works. We might get something about the Padres, and maybe they'll talk about Tatis a little bit. But that's all for today's episode, guys, on the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember, tomorrow's episode talking about the good, bad, and concluding. Big player review for Jackson Merrill. And then Friday's episode is a conversation with my guy, Jake Garriotti of CBS 8 Sports San Diego. We'll get his insider scoops. He's closer to the Padres than I am, being a sports reporter in San Diego and talking in the clubhouse. We're going to get his thoughts on Mike Shildt, on that whole situation, and a lot more, including some of your guys' mailbag questions. But until that next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friday Faithful homies, take care.